Hi and welcome back to this channel. I'm the Spell Singer and this is my review of the series of game books known as Knightmare. And this derived from a classic series from the 1980s and 90s, series of Knightmare. And I'll go into a little bit about that before I do the actual game book reviews. Now, this review is going to bring you a very short origin story so you can understand where this series of books came from. So a little bit about the Knightmare TV show. And then for each book, of which there are 6, I shall do a very brief title and book number description, and then I'll read the blurb for each book, talk a little bit about the plot, and then concentrate on a summary and score out of 10 for each title. And there were 6 titles. There was a 7th, but it was primarily a puzzle book more so than a game book. So yeah, this all kicked off back in 1987, where CITV, which was the series at the time, they brought this fantasy world, this kind of medieval dungeon to life on TV for kids, basically. And it kind of derived from that D&D kind of style of game. And basically, it was cutting edge tech at the time, and it allowed 4 kids to guide one of their number through this Knightmare Castle. And the brainchild behind this was a fella by the name of Tim Child, who brought us this kind of show that was based on a couple of Spectrum, ZX Spectrum games that he obviously loved, based on that sort of loosely. And yeah, developed it with his Dungeons and Dragons style and gave us this TV show. He also brought on board this fella called David Rowe, a renowned artist and illustrator who designed all these dungeon levels and brought the whole world to life. Now, the way it worked is you had these 4 kids show up. 3 of them would be the kids to direct their friend, the Dungeoneer, through the dungeons. And they would show up and it would essentially be a studio, which would be Treguard's little throne room. And Treguard was like the dungeon master, and he was there to sort of advise these 3 kids who would direct their friend through the dungeons. And it would basically be his throne, a treasure chest, a fireplace, that kind of thing. And the 3 kids would be sat down and they'd have a big screen in front of them, depending on which series it was, and they'd be able to see each dungeon room as they directed their friend through it. And the reason I say directed is because essentially the dungeon was just a studio room, blue screen, So they could see the dungeon with obviously a room mapped onto it, but the poor kid in this room was just a blue screen. So to kind of explain that way, what they had is either the Dungeoneer would have the Helm of Justice, which he would put on. It would come down to about here, so it would blind him from everything except for what was directly below him. So he'd be able to see his feet, he or she would be able to see what was directly in front of them, but nothing more. So the Dungeoneer needed to rely on his or her pals to kind of direct them through the dungeon. So the kid would walk into each room and say, "Where am I?" And the kids would say something like, "You're in a room, blah, blah, blah." They would describe the room so the kid could get an idea about what was in front of him, and what surrounded him, what kind of environment he was in, and he or she was in. And they would give instructions. The 3 kids would give instructions to the Dungeoneer, and they would say something along the lines of sidestep to your left or your right, turn around, turn 25 degrees to your right, do a backflip, whatever it was, walk forwards, walk backwards, just to sort of guide this person through the dungeon and interact with any obstacles or traps or people that they came across. And they would go on like that through 3 different levels of the dungeon, and they would, like I say, interact with different actors who would represent merchants and jesters, villains, and there'd be sort of clue rooms where you could pick up items, and you'd have to decide which items were useful and which ones were not. You could spell cast as well, so the clever ones were the kids that decided beforehand who would do the spell casting, who would do the directing, because otherwise they'd all shout over each other, and as happened many times, the poor Dungeoneer has 3 kids all telling him to do different things, and inevitably it ended badly. This show was notoriously difficult. There were 8 seasons. Now, generally, in a season, there may have been 1 or 2 winners at most, and a couple of seasons I don't think there were any. So it was really difficult, and it was more the better for winning it, when you knew you had to, really work hard and communicate well to sort of get through this. It was not a pushover. It was really tricky. And that was the show. So these books, they came to life from this show. And if ever a TV series deserved to be adapted, into a series of adventure game books, then this was it. I'll run as you can see, all the images of kind of what this dungeon in the TV show looked like through this video, but you get an idea of what they were up against. Well, they kind of tried to bring that into these game books. So very clever. Like I say, 6 books were published between 1988 and 1993. So I was a whippersnapper at the time. And with the 7th book, like I mentioned, was Lord Fear's Domain, which, like I say, wasn't really a game book. It was more of a puzzle book. So I will touch on it, but I'm not going to sort of review it in the same kind of way. Each book was split into 2. So you had this little novella, which was a story about Treguard's adventures in medieval time. And then the final part was the game book. And they were only short books, really. There was sort of between 100 and 160 references on average. They weren't difficult. They were primarily targeted towards kids and people who were just getting into the game book world. So let's review this series of books, and we'll start with Knightmare Book 1. Okay, so book number 1. And this one is Can You Beat the Challenge, which is kind of a weird title, but I've got the feeling that they didn't anticipate there'd be quite so many, so they didn't really give it a generic title like the others got. This book came out in 23rd of September 1988, and it was written by Tim Child and Dave Morris. Tim Child, obviously the brainchild of this series, but Dave Morris had written books before for the Fighting Fantasy series and other such series as well, other such game book series. It was illustrated by David Rowe, who we touched on. And just briefly, the novella kind of sees Treguard, the dungeon master. He's this Saxon who battles to reclaim his ancestral home and to be basically defined England from this sort of ancient evil. And in the game book, the reader has to choose a choice of 3 missions of the Nightmare Dungeon. So the game book kind of reflects the story, the novella. So if you've read the novella, you can pick up on clues that you can then use to your advantage in this game book. So just to give you an idea, I'll read the blurb to you. Ride with Treguard, outlawed Saxon knight and supreme swordsman, through the dark sorcerous lands of history as he sets off on a torturous quest to regain his birthright. His task to seize once more the keys to the grim northern keep known as Knightmare Castle. Read carefully as Treguard's quest unfolds. You too can arm yourself against evil and prepare for the ultimate test. For deep within the depths of this nightmare story lie the dread dungeons of Knightmare Castle, where you too can struggle to overcome the monstrous puzzles of ITV's award-winning game series Knightmare. To begin, the novella is quite interesting. It's well written. It's a well-written fantasy quest with some informative sort of background information, like I say, that you can pick up and use in the adventure, and based on their characters from the TV show. The game book is it's okay, but it's not that interesting as a sort of novella. Although simple, the game book does have some advantages. The way it makes use of information from the novella makes reading the whole book quite satisfying. There are some interesting design elements, like the cheat trap in reference 44, which is quite amusing, as is the unreachable Easter egg section in reference 42. Some of the death scenes are quite entertaining as well, but the only real flaw of the gameplay is that the life force gauge is a bit tricky to keep track of. So in the series, they brought this big sort of vision of the Helm of Justice, and bits of the armour would break off and then your skin would peel off. You'd be left with your fleshless skull, and that would be death. But in this, it's not done quite so well. It's hard to lose track of, but fortunately the life force is used differently in later books. So they obviously worked on that and realised it wasn't working quite so well, and they made things a bit less ambiguous. It was published during the second TV series, and the first 100 pages of the book are devoted to this novella. Like I say, it's quite good. It tells of how Tregod reclaimed his ancestral home, the Knightmare Castle, and the remaining pages are devoted to the Gamebook, and boasts sort of several similarities to the series, like the use of life force, the life force mechanic. However, the show used it as like a type of clock, like a time mechanism for the challengers that had to beat, yet in the book, the life force degrades every time you use a door or portal. And you've got, like I mentioned, 3 levels. And in the series, they were kind of depicted by a wellway, which you could go down to the next level. But in this one, they're typically either quite similar, or maybe a dragon, fly from one level to another. And that works really well. But like I say, your 3 levels of the life gauge, green, amber, and red, would decrease as you move from room to room. So quite tricky to keep track of. This game book offers 3 different adventure settings called Slightly Difficult, Harder, and Hardest, which I always thought was a bit odd. I mean, what's wrong with easy, medium, and difficult? But yes, Slightly Difficult, Harder, and Hardest. And then the gameplay, only 105 references. Like I mentioned, it's quite short, and this seems like it's overreaching itself, to be honest. It's a bit like the game replicates the program well enough, but they could have been so much more, but they are aimed at a younger audience. Each adventure is made up of different rooms where you have to answer riddles and solve puzzles. And there are clue rooms where you have to choose items, and you can take these onwards, and you can get spells as well. And obviously the book is unable to replicate the spell casting from the series, so it's just a case of either you've got it or you don't. The book has a similar sense of humour to the TV show. Even though there is a lack of plot, it is fun to kind of don the helm of justice and challenge yourself. And of course, back in those days, some of us, we wanted to get on the show, we couldn't, and this was the next best thing. The book is keen to trap those who cheat, like giving the option to use spells that don't exist, or mention all 3 items, and of course you can only take 2 items from each clue room. So in keeping with the show's spirit, which I always liked, and there are various reoccurring characters as well from the show, such as Granitus, the Wall Monster, and Lilith, the witch, who also shows up. The book doesn't really try to do anything that would be unrecognisable on the show's budget, and feels all the more authentic for it. Some of the death scenes are quite gruesome, in contrast to the TV show. Overall, the first book is not particularly memorable as an adventure game book by itself, but if you were a Knightmare fan, when it was released, certainly you would have enjoyed it even so. It's a faithful interpretation of the show, let's say that. Right, I would give that a 6 out of 10. It's a good first entry, but let's take a look at book number 2. Okay, book number 2. Yeah, this one is a cracker, The Labyrinth of Fear. This was published on the 22nd of September 1989. This time it was just written by Dave Morris, so a solo effort from Mr. Morris, but we've also got David Rowe back on board doing the illustrations which go with it. Now, the blurb on this one I'll read you, but the plot is essentially a carry-on from the first book. So in the novella, the Tregard meets an old foe, and he travels basically to a mysterious and dangerous wood. In the game book, the reader encounters characters from the novella again, so good continuity, and goes on a kind of quest related to Tregard's earlier adventures. So the blurb on this one: don the helm of justice and join Tregard as he rides in pursuit of his old foe, Rupert of Armitage, headlong into the eerie realm of an ancient king. Read carefully, for as the grim game of cat and mouse is played out in haunted depths of Anwin Wood, you can prepare for the ultimate challenge. The monstrous puzzles and sorcery of ITV's award-winning game series Knightmare. Can Tregard hope to stand against the power of one who has ruled since time began? Can you? Yeah. So yeah, it really gets you into kind of like the feel of the TV show. but via the medium of these books. So in this one, the novella is a good sequel, and it's a little bit stronger, in my opinion, to the previous book storyline, making use of all the continuity and featuring some of this quality writing that you kind of get used to with Dave Morris. The plot doesn't have quite the epic feel that the last book had, but it still works on a smaller scale. The Gamebook is a definitive improvement, over the previous, having a greater sense of purpose for one thing and being more related to the story for another. It is quite short still. I think this one's this one's a bit close to sort of 120 or 130 references. So it's still quite short, but it feels a little bit plotless at times in comparison with the novella. But the book is still good. It's a good read on a whole. The novella tells another adventure of Treguard's and basically the gathering of his fellow knights. The story is well written, has a smaller scale, and even has good continuity from the first adventure. The continuity of all 6 novellas is quite strong, actually, having said that. The TV show, Treguard was the dungeon master. He was portrayed as a more neutral kind of character, whereas the novellas have him more as a heroic kind of person. The Gamebook section explicitly has him signed with the Dungeoneer, so you've got him backing you all the way, which is something he didn't really start doing in a TV show until much later in the series. The changes to the Gamebook they're kind of more interesting in this one. I think it was 170 references, so a little bit bigger than the last one. The game is sort of a bit longer, if you like, than the first one, and its scale and scope are much larger as well. The life force rules have changed, which is a good thing. And every time you take injury, it degrades rather than every time you enter a room. So that kind of makes more sense in keeping with that fighting fantasy feel. It's no longer attempting to be a measure of time, that life force gauge, as it was with the first book, and perhaps a step away from the TV show almost. The clue rooms are gone, those rooms where you could pick up items, although the inventory still works with a similar way with the book, giving you kind of all the items that you can take in an inventory cap of about 5. The Gamebook is also more directly related to the novella, which makes for a bit more of an interesting read. Otherwise, it's business as usual, with the riddles and the puzzles to solve, moving from one room to another to reveal all the different traps that the dungeon has for you. It's more ambitious than the first one. Being longer allows it to kind of integrate with the riddles a little bit easier, and answers better. And then there's also, there's not quite so many dead ends and instant deaths that the first book had. So all around, this is a stronger entry, and therefore I would give this one a 7 out of 10. Right, let's check out book number 3. Right, book number 3, so A Fortress of Assassins. Now, this one came out on the 21st of September 1990. It was also by Dave Morris again, so another solo effort from Dave. But we also have David Rowe doing the artwork again, so what a good team, actually. Good joint effort from those two. The plot on this one, just very briefly, in the novella, you've got Treguard again, who searches for the lost heir of Richard the Lionheart. And in the Gamebook, the reader, basically, you visit the Knightmare Castle once more and go through a fairly standard adventure through it. So it's not too different. But to give you an idea about what that relates to, this is the blurb. Join Treguard, Lord of Knightmare Castle, as he sets off on a quest across Europe in search of the rightful heir of the throne of England, the son of Richard the Lionheart, brought to the Holy Land many years ago by his father. Read carefully, for as Treguard faces the might of the assassins' hordes and the challenge of Warrior Queen, you too can prepare for the ultimate test, the monstrous puzzles and sorcery of ITV's award-winning game series Knightmare. Can Treguard survive the dark caverns beneath the impregnable fortress of death? Can you? Yeah, so same old thing, really. Summary. As with the previous book, the novella is by far the strongest point, and that is a common reoccurring fact with these adventures. They expanding on sort of Morris's interesting interpretation of King John's England, and once again using sort of continuity with the earlier books. All ties in really nicely. Moving from frozen mountains to heated deserts, it's an excellent story, but unfortunately the Gamebook segment is, again, not quite so good, having little relation with the novella, and also manages to sort of feel far too short and unsatisfying. It's quite linear, this one. A good point is it's the first adventure in the series to make use of a six-sided die, so we're sort of getting into that whole era, dice rolling, sort of bringing on that random nature into the books. However, this does seem to just add a new and random way of dying, to be honest with you. It's definitely a shame that the excellent writing and storyline of the novella could somehow have been applied to the interactive section of this book, but I can live with that. The fourth TV series of Knightmare marked a major departure, where producers felt that the CGI dungeon crawler had perhaps reached its limit. So we had like 3 seasons of that on the TV show back in the day, and the location footage was used instead. So all these famous landmarks and locations around the UK were used instead. So they sort of pre-filmed all this really cool footage and then spliced that into the show. So the location footage was used instead, and a lot of the series, opening things up to the outside world, kind of made everything a lot bigger. Unfortunately, Fortress of Assassins, the game book, failed to kind of capitalise on this, which is a bit of a shame. The novella is up to standard with the first 2, but it includes the interesting sort of twist that is set during Treguard's 5 years in the Holy Land in the early 13th century, sort of making use of figures from legend. Although the TV series had started setting sequences outdoors now, the game book didn't, which is a bit of a shame. It could have done well to have sort of mimicked what the show was doing at the time, and it meant that you've got a third consecutive dungeon crawl story directly inspired by a TV show. It's the first book in the series to sort of require dice, which is a welcome, but they're only ever really used to determine blind chance, which is a bit of a shame. And other than that, there's nothing at all really that distinguishes it from the previous 2. So it's kind of like a rehash, really. It's entertaining enough, however. The features some of the really good riddles in there. It's pretty unremarkable as a game book, though. So I can only really give this one a 6 out of 10. But that's not a problem. Let's take a look at book number 4. Okay, book number 4, The Sorcerer's Isles. So this was published on 19th of September 1991. And again, we've got Dave Morris on board writing this, with Dave Rowe, who did the artwork. So another great effort from these two. Just very briefly, the plot on this one, both the novella and the gamebook deal with quests for the Holy Grail. So that's a really nice touch. Through the novella follows Treguard, and the gamebook allows the reader to do the adventuring. To give you an idea, I'll read the blurb to you. So this one, travel with Treguard, Lord of Knightmare Castle, as he sets off on a perilous journey across the desert wastes and storm-tossed treacherous seas on a search for the ultimate relic, the legendary Grail. Read carefully, for as Treguard's ship is battered by elemental forces and dark unnatural wizardries, shield the secrets of jungle-clad island, you can too prepare for the ultimate test, the monstrous puzzles and sorcery of ITV award-winning game series Knightmare. Can you, Treguard, stand against the sorcerer's power of one who guards a treasure beyond price? Can you? Well, yeah. So, to summarise on this one, this is a good entry, actually. This is one of the stronger ones. So by now they know what they're doing. The novella is very entertaining. Again, drawing in characters from the past books and making sort of interesting use of figures from legend. The ending is impressive, and it makes a kind of suitable conclusion to the books in the series aimed at older readers. And I mention that because this is where that ends. After this, the next 2 books are definitely aimed more towards children, shall we say, than these 4 that preceded. But that's not a problem. They're still very good, but you can definitely see the difference in style. The gamebook is an improvement over the previous, like I mentioned, though perhaps not as strong as the second adventure in the series, which was really good. it adds a few new rules requiring the reader to keep track of armour, dexterity and chivalry. And these points are in addition to the usual life force gauge that you get, your inventory, and of course your spells, which never really change there in all the books. The adventure has also more flavour than its predecessor. It's due to the fact mainly that for the first time you get to leave the confines of Knightmare Castle and leave the dungeon behind, go off into the woods, explore the lakes and the forests and the settlements. Unfortunately, its downfall is in its length, and it's far too short. I think this one is, let's have a look. This one is like 156 references, so it's really short and it's quite linear, so that only exasperates that fact. And there's also there's also new mechanics for money and provisions as well, so it's almost starting to feel a little bit like a fighting fantasy book. This adventure is more plot orientated, I would say, than previous, and it feels like capturing the spirit of the TV show. And there are lots of encounters that feel very different from anything in the previous 3 books. Still, it retains that kind of dungeon crawl feel that the first 3 books had. Still set in Knightmare's expanded universe, though. The narrative is strong, the prose is much better, the puzzles are more intelligent, and it seems that Traegar's development in this book is quite consistent with how he is perceived in the series at the time. He appears to be really going somewhere with this book. It's a bit of a shame that they didn't carry on with this caliber. But this one I would give a 7 out of 10. Right, let's have a look at book 5. Okay, book number 5, The Forbidden Gate. So we're 17th of September 1992 now. That was the publication date for this book. We're still with Dave Morris, who's writing these, and we're still with David Rowe, but also we have Jan Thwaites, who helps with the illustrations. This one, just to give you an idea on the plot, very briefly, it's the novella is basically 3 children. It's a story of 3 children from present day to find their way to Knightmare Castle, so sort of a time travel adventure. And in the game book, the reader must travel to the distant islands and retrieve the egg of a dragon. And just to give you an idea about that, here's the blurb. The setting: out to explore a mysterious, overgrown path, Sam, Jimmy and Pippa discover they have stumbled upon a magic gateway to a world of dreams, the legendary Knightmare Castle. But Traegard, master of Knightmare Castle, has been taken prisoner by the dark powers of the dread Lord Fear. Read carefully, for as Traegard and the group venture into the depths, you too must prepare for the ultimate challenge, the monstrous puzzles and sorcery of ITV's award-winning game series Knightmare. Can Traegard thwart the grim plans of Lord Fear and survive the dark challenge of the shadowy caverns below the castle? Can you? Okay. This one, noticeably targeted towards a younger audience. So a change in tone from that of book 1 to 4. The gritty and historical stories of the past 4 books have been replaced by more of a child's tale. The novella treads new ground by including a blind character. And the game book, though very short, actually feels much lengthier than the earlier adventures. The reader gets to choose from a list of skills. It flows quite well, definitely differently on each trip. Additionally, there are use of codewords as well, which obviously found their way into the fighting fantasy books as well. And you use these to keep track of certain events. Quite a clever mechanic. So that means basically early adventures can change events later down the line, depending on how you play out the game. It's unfortunate that the earlier books did not remain in the changeover to a younger audience, but then I'm guessing that they felt it was time for a change. Forbidden Gate makes a dramatic change in tone for the series. The book expresses, like I said, expressly aimed at children. It's even under a different publishing label, so Corgi to Yearling. And on top of the changes, the game book runs to just 97 references, so it's quite short, one of the shortest. And the serious tone of the first 3, certainly first 4 novellas, has been replaced by kind of like a simplified short story. Some creativity at least goes into the game design. You've got dice Dice again, the player can choose one skill from a list at the beginning, which at least means some sort of playthrough variation. And you've got codewords again, so they're back, keep track of events. But that's about it, really. The adventure is more open. Maybe that explains why it feels so short. So it's more of an open world setting, which is they established in the past book. But it feels a lot less like Knightmare than any of the other 4 books did. And for that reason, I would probably only give this one a 5 out of 10. Right, let's move on to book number 6. Okay, book number 6, Dragon's Lair. We still have Dave Morris doing the honours. This one was published on the 21st of October, 1993. And the illustrations, the internal artwork was done by Acadia, I believe it was. I think that's the name. I think that's how you pronounce it, Acadia. So we don't have the regulars anymore. And the artwork does definitely show as very different style to the previous books. Now, the plot on this one, it's quite similar to the last. So you have the novella, you have this boy from the 20th century, finds himself involved in a kind of mission for Treguard involving the protection of dragon eggs. And in the game book, the reader basically searched for a kidnapped future king. So it's a lot more simplified, but let me read the blurb to you so you can get an idea of what happens in this one. When William discovers a figure trapped beneath the ice of a local pond, he plunges into a fantastic adventure in a wintry world. For Treguard, the powerful lord of Knightmare Castle, needs William's help in a dramatic quest to save a newly hatched dragon from a terrible fate at the hands of an evil wizard. Read carefully, as for Treguard leads William through the danger of an ice-locked kingdom. You too must prepare for the ultimate challenge, the monstrous puzzles and sorcery of ITV's award-winning game series Knightmare. Can Treguard help William reach the dragon beneath the castle before the evil wizard and his ally, the sinister Queen Asandra? Can you? Okay, so yeah, this one similar to the last in that the novella is not too bad, and it benefits from having a sort of fairly interesting protagonist, but it ends a bit abruptly, and its plot seems a little strange in light of the subject of the gamebook section of this previous book. The gamebook here is well designed, and it uses codewords for continuity and has kind of, lasting a sort of fairly decent length as well. It's not as challenging as the previous books. It's definitely simplified for the new audience. So slightly less challenging than the previous adventures. It has a sense of purpose. The mission is quite vague, however. It's not a bad end to the series, but certainly not as strong as the first 4 volumes. Dragon's Lair is very much cut from the same cloth as Forbidden Gates and describes itself as 6th in the series. Both have that kind of childish attraction to them, but the novella is still fun. It has little to do with Knightmare or the ensuing game book, but the game book is okay, losing sort of the skills from the last book, but keeping those code words as well. So no skills, but you've got the code words, so that's still good. It's still very simplistic though. Certainly in comparison to any of the previous 4. The results aren't very satisfying, and overall, if you were a huge Knightmare fan from back in the day, you're looking for a sort of nostalgia kick, then that was enough. They still kept you interested, but the fans may have been a little bit disappointed with this one, but yeah. So for that reason, I'll probably also give this one a 5 out of 10. And that was it. That was the 6 adventure books, game books, in this series. But there was a final one, book 7, which was more of a puzzle book. But let's have a look at that one now. Okay, so book 7 was Lord Fear's Domain. I don't own this book. I only ever bought the game books, and like I say, this was more sort of a puzzle book rather than a game adventure book. It came out on the 6th of October 1994 by Dave Morris again, This time we've got the internal illustrations by Russ Nicholson, no less, from the Fighting Fantasy series of books. So good old Russ Nicholson's here, and is probably one of the main factors why this book was as popular as it was. Now, the seventh and final Knightmare book, it's not really a game book, rather a straightforward sort of puzzle book. It's very expensive, so I don't own the copy. You can look it up on eBay, and you'll probably need to get a loan out if you are planning on buying it. The book begins in sort of familiar territory as the game books, with the beginning of a short sort of story set in Knightmare's universe. Dave Morris is once again writing, and the tone is of the story is sort of similar to the previous two entries. It's not long in terms of like the story length, but it's still okay. It's the teenage protagonists are basically transported to this realm of Knightmare, and they come across a riddle and they have to solve each riddle, and the book continues in a sort of similar dot-to-dot sort of mathematical, logical puzzles, mazes, codes, while the main story sort of continues. So you read through the narrative, you get a puzzle, you solve the puzzle, then you carry on. So it's that kind of setup. It's okay, it's quite good. There's quite a lot of thought that's gone into the presentation of the puzzles, and things are helped by the high quality illustrations provided by Russ Nicholson. So like I say, from the Fighting Fantasy series. The book's big selling point is the kind of fourth wall busting conclusion, where the protagonist finally meets up with Lord Fear, who's been planning how to kill them. Which is quite a nice touch. And this was like the very last Knightmare book, and publishing probably during the broadcast of the 8th and final series of the TV show as well, so they kind of tied up nicely. There's no indication that Morris knew this was to be, the final story, and could be that he wanted to try something different with this kind of puzzle adventure book. I don't know, but there it is. Nonetheless, Lord Fear's Domain. It's a lot of fun. It's a pretty good send-off for the series, and I'll give it a 6 out of 10. Okay, yeah, so that is the review of those 6 game books plus 1 puzzle book. If you were a fan of Knightmare back in the day and you want to relive that nostalgia of Knightmare Castle, then in the description is a link to a really cool YouTube channel which more or less has all 8 seasons of that show. You can just watch every episode and read the comments and, usual thing. But it's really good. Have a look at that channel. If you loved Knightmare, you will love that channel. But yeah, that's my series. I was a big fan back in the day. I never got to go on the show. Put a comment in if you did. And I will catch you all in the next review.